Thanks very much, Cathaoirleach, and again, like everyone else, I thank our industrious chairman who has us here again on a Thursday evening. We are the most productive committee and issuing many reports, but it is important to say that this is the first justice report that we've published. We have published two in relation to our equality brief, and I think in some ways it's not accidental that this was the topic that we chose first, because it's an enormous interest to members of society and to members of Garda Síochána, and I think we've all been educated over the past number of years, and I'm not going to repeat the points with regard to the committee's recommendations, except to say that we see them all as a package. This isn't just aspirational ideas that we've thrown out there for the crack. These are serious observations made in part on the basis of the engagement we had with the oversight bodies and the Commissioner and her team, but in part also from our experience over the past period. And in that context, I obviously welcome the fact that the Minister is going to take on board some of the committee's recommendations. That's a very welcome development, but without in any way being churlish. I have to say it's an awful pity that some of the recommendations weren't taken on board before, because it is a matter of history that many of the recommendations in this bill and many of are in this report, and indeed many that I'm sure will appear in the Minister's bill, were recommended by us a number of years ago. When we had the first the GSOC bill a couple of years ago, and indeed the Policing Authority bill. And I'm not saying this in any way to point score, but the reality is that by not having some of these provisions in over the past 2 years since the last GSOC bill was implemented, people have suffered as a result of that, because GSOC has not been able to do the job that people expect of them or think that a Garda oversight body would do. And, you know, I've made the point publicly before, and I don't mind doing it again. When we first heard of GSOC or came into contact, we were aware that many members of the public who went to GSOC believed, and many still do, that GSOC are part of the conspiracy, if you like, that they were there to just whitewash the activity of the Gardaí and to not uphold any complaints, because the low level of follow-up and so on, and we maybe thought that at first. It hasn't been our experience in reality. The engagement we've had with GSOC over the past number of years would lead us to believe that there are incredibly capable personnel inside the ranks of GSOC, but there are incredibly deficient structures within which they can work, and while they have a desire to hold the Gardaí to account and seriously investigate complaints, we have not given them sufficient legislation to do that. And that's what the committee is asking the Minister to do in this regard, because we need it, and they need it if they're going to do the job they're supposed to do. They also need the resources and the ability to fill vacancies when they arise and so on. That's where the point about resources, we feel, is very strong. I think when we're looking at oversight, we have to be realistic about why has this gained popular currency now. Why is it something that the dogs on the streets will be talking about? And to me, it's for one reason only. It is because of the heroic stance of a number of Garda whistleblowers who've shed the spotlight on what was a very insular blue wall of silence, an organisation where, contrary to what the Commissioner would say, dissent was absolutely deemed to be disloyalty and punished accordingly, and rats and you know, all the rest of it, and, you know, death threats and serious intimidation against people who tried to do the right thing was the order of the day. And I think in terms of the public perception of what a whistleblower is, has been completely stood on its head, because now a whistleblower is somebody who's readily identified actually as a position to be lauded, as a valuable contribution to changing things for the better for all Gardaí and members of society. And, you know, over the past period, a lot of guards, and there are a lot of good guards, believed that things were going to change and stepped forward accordingly to join the ranks of the whistleblowers to try and improve situations. And we've said here before, we've had engagement now with 10 serving members of Garda Síochána who've made protected disclosures of one sort or another. Now, one of the changes in the last legislation, obviously, is that GSOC is now the confidential recipient and the vehicle through which Garda make complaints. And that needs to be radically beefed up because, quite frankly, GSOC do not have the time or the resources to be able to deal with that adequately. They certainly don't have the legislative power to compel Garda cooperation that they need. And it has been a fact that many of those cases have stalled because of the delay in Garda Síochána handing over material that GSOC needed to conduct its investigation. And that non-cooperation continues today. It can be covered up in sort of administrative delays or all the rest of it, but it does impact on the work there. And I mean, we've made the points before. A number of those whistleblower cases are very much in the public domain, but a number of them who came forward and whose cases are with GSOC for, say, over 2 years. In the case of Keith Harrison, there's been relatively limited meaningful engagement with GSOC because of a delay in documentation and so on. We know in Nick Keogh's case that the GSOC investigation is practically concluded. There are recommendations for disciplinary, but the guards have not agreed that GSOC could be involved in that. But these are very, very serious matters that are, I suppose, currently ongoing. I mean, you have to ask yourself the question, if things are improving, why do we have a situation where all of those Gardaí are out sick, bar one? That all of them have made allegations about bullying and harassment since they came forward, which is a direct contrast to the public statements of the Commissioner that she doesn't know about any harassment, when we know that she has been directly informed of that harassment, as indeed you have, Minister, most recently, with very serious allegations which were widely covered in the provincial media of a court case after Christmas, an assault case where in the public open court evidence was produced of doctored witness statements because the people involved in the assault were involved in a case where a Garda was accused of involvement in the drug trade and so on. So this is actually having an impact on, if you like, criminal prosecutions and so on. And I think, you know, things can't be right if that level of people are out sick. And ironically enough, the one Garda who made the protected disclosure who isn't out sick, whose case was an appalling one of a family law case where he got information that the judge, who was a family friend of his former wife, had met before the court case and had then granted a protection order against him. He made a complaint to the Gardaí about that. Not only was his complaint not investigated, but the senior guard involved actually initiated criminal proceedings against him for interference with the judicial process when clearly it didn't meet the criteria. Now, that person was a victim, albeit he's a member of the Garda as well, but he was a victim in this circumstance, and he was re-victimised by what that senior Garda did. And to add insult to injury to him and a number of the existing Garda whistleblowers, the very man who did that was brought in by the Commissioner to our Justice Committee hearings in regard to oversight as a witness for Garda Síochána. Now, that doesn't develop confidence among serving members if that type of behaviour is going on. And you'll see from our recommendations that we want the policing authority to have more control over the Commissioner. This isn't a new thing, it's been mentioned before. That needs to be beefed up. And it does fit into your remarks about the O'Neill report, because quite frankly, I don't find it acceptable that you've had that report since October. It's now February. It's not a big report. It's a pretty straightforward. Well, the process was initiated in October. He was supposed to have it finished quite quickly. You've had it now for probably 2 months, certainly 6 weeks or more. Let's remember, Justice O'Neill's report, or former Justice, was only a paper review. It's not a big body of work, and clearly the problem is that there are questions for the Commissioner to answer, and the political problem is how can she remain in place while that is investigated, because she can't when every other Garda who's under investigation is removed from that. So the ability of the policing authority to hire and fire the Commissioner is key to develop that independence at the top, because that's where the change is going to come from if we're going to get the type of service that we need. But we are a long way from that. We are on the road, and I do appreciate that, but are we halfway through the journey? I'm not sure. But we'll be looking forward to seeing your bill, but we really want to see all of our recommendations in it.